For me, the performance is sacred. This is sacred space. The audience come from the outside in an event mediated by commerce.
Hello and welcome to this video, and on this video I'm going to be giving you my reaction to In the Court of the Crimson King, which is a documentary film about King Crimson, not the album. If you're coming here to watch about the album, I've tried to make it quite you know, obvious from the thumbnail and the title and everything, but if you've come here, then you know, go away if you want to hear me talk about the album. I'm going to be talking about the documentary. It came out a while ago now, and I haven't had a chance to watch it, and I sat down and watched it last night, and as I was watching it, it really blew me away. It's an incredible documentary. You don't have to be a King Crimson fan to watch this. You just have to be a fan of music and music's importance. I'm going to do my reaction to this video, and it's going to be a heavy reaction. It really is. So this may well be a Philosophy Sunday. I think this is going to be a Philosophy Sunday video, maybe. I haven't got any plan. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, so it might not be. So I don't know what I'm about to say. You know, and when I make these videos, I have to try and access something, and there's nothing better than when I have managed to access this thing, which is like being on a surfboard, and you get on the surfboard and you are then riding the wave, and I'm watching the minutes go round, you know, and it's like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, and you are just, these thoughts that are coming out are not my thoughts. I didn't have them before I started talking, okay? Sometimes I have a think and I've got a rough idea, but in this case I haven't. You know, I watched the documentary once last night. I've gone to bed, I've woken up, and here I am, and I'm about to do the reaction. So shall we start? This is my reaction. Film starts up. It's got that stark modernist dark look to it, with this red lettering, which reminds me of Stanley Kubrick. It's got this sort of clockwork orange aesthetic. It's all cold and dark and forbidding, which is a little bit like King Crimson. Robert Fripp comes in and he starts to really make statements that are so profound about King Crimson. Right at the start, you know, he sees music making as a sacred practice, right? And in doing that, because he has so much respect to that sacred practice, he expects the other musicians to have the same level of respect, the same approach, which with Robert Fripp is very specific and actually quite strange. And I'm going to explore what that approach is. And musicians are going to have to step in line or not. And there is no wavering. In terms of Robert Fripp's view, there's no wavering on that. But there's two Robert Fripps as well. There's the Robert Fripp pre going into JG Bennett's, you know, what should we call it? JG Bennett's group. I'm just going to call that. It's called the Centre for the Harmonious Development. Also, I can't remember the title. It's like I said, I'm coming out of this from. It's just I want it to be a reaction, so I haven't done any research. I can't remember that, but after he goes, in 1974, Robert Fripp disappears into this sort of spiritual commune run by a guy called JG Bennett. And when he emerged from that, I think he's a different person. And I think Fripp's difficult personality, he came to terms with when he went into that group. It's always been there. But obviously the way he operated before then, which is up until Red, really upset certain musicians, and there's a real, you know, almost like a trauma with those musicians. There is some trauma with the Discipline band, but this band has become more harmonious as time's gone on. So that's the idea, because musicians now are aware of Robert Fripp's wants. They might not be in line with his view of the music as being sacred in the way that Robert Fripp is, but they're willing to try and reach for what he wants. So the band's a lot more harmonious. So that's how the thing starts up. We start up with that. musicians are interviewed. There's a lot of comedy moments because you become aware that it's not like your normal documentary. A lot of the musicians they're talking to, like Adrian Belew and Bill Bruford, have a knowing, almost like not so much Belew. Belew genuinely seems to be upset by the fact that he thought he was in a band with a songwriting partner, and this was perhaps the greatest songwriting partner he'd ever had. And then when he realised he wasn't a partner, he was a cog in Fripp's machine, that has upset him deeply. And at one point he says, I think Fripp needs me now. There's a trauma, there's an angst there. Ian MacDonald, Fripp was horrible to him in the original lineup of King Crimson. And he also feels that he let Robert down. And at one point, and I think Ian MacDonald died a couple of years after this was made, but he puts his hands into prayer and he says, "I'm sorry, Robert, I'm sorry." So this trauma of these musicians trying to achieve something, the music's more important. To Robert Fripp, the music is more important. And I want to get into why Fripp thinks the music is so important. And this is going to take me a while, because this is what I got from this film. The guy that's making the film, Toby Amis, he's obviously a King Crimson fan, and he's a good documentary filmmaker. And he approaches this as though it is a normal documentary, like a modern documentary where you've got a digital video camera and you're walking around, you're filming and you're talking, you're going to edit all that together, get some nice... He wants to approach it like that. But Fripp's going to come in and he's going to try and sabotage this documentary, even though he's the one that has asked for it to happen. Right, that's an interesting thing as well. So we get things like, they're on stage and they're just having an interview. He's interviewing Jacko Jaksic at one point on stage. Fripp's in the background. It's typical modern documentary. And he's asking, Jacko some questions, and Fripp suddenly turns around and just starts to shout in the background at them. That's a load of rubbish. He's swearing his head off. It's so not what you get in that genre of documentary. So Toby Amis is walking into this world. You're quite aware he's walking into it. They go, what the hell's going on? That's the feeling you get. This is the feeling of walking into King Crimson's world and go, what is going on? And King Crimson's world is Robert Fripp's world. And Robert Fripp acts like an autocratic despot. I've called this video, there's a subtitle, Robert Fripp, prog visionary or autocratic despot. Well, I think the answer is he's both. And the reason why morally he can act like an autocratic despot is because he is in the service of something sacred. That's what he believes. So it's not him. He's not trying to get his way. He's trying to do service to something that is greater than him. It's something profound. And I really want to try and get in on this video what that is. And you can tell I'm revving up to try and do that myself. It's going to be a difficult one. I will try my best. So, if you say, what is this video about? You'll go, oh, there's this band called King Crimson. It's quite comedic because, Robert Fripp's a bit of an autocratic despot, and people are going to come on and say how much they hated him or they loved him, and there's going to be sort of conflict and all that sort. That's what draws you in. That's why I wanted to watch it, because on the trailer we see people swearing at each other, calling each other's names and all that type of stuff. So you want to watch it because of that. So that's the surface bit. Behind this is the very thing that opens up the video, and that is the idea of the sacred, and that music, although mediated by commerciality, it's a phrase that Fripp uses, which is absolutely brilliant. I'm going to use it forever now. Under the surface of that, the people who buy the ticket, buy the albums, is because they're having a peak experience when they listen to it, and which is different to your average rock band. King Crimson's different because people have bought into this band and they expect to have some sort of spiritual experience. And this is really interesting because my favourite band's the Mavish Orchestra. John McLaughlin, when he made that band, he had that idea that this band, within the commercial framework of rock and roll at that time, was going to perform a spiritual, and spiritual's the worst word for this, but a sort of metaphysical enlightened peak experience. And King Crimson, I've always felt that whereas the Mavish Nocturne is white, it's heavy, but it's white in its heaviness. King Crimson's dark. A fan says, what's King Crimson about? And they say it's about the devil. That the character of King Crimson is a demon. It's Beelzebub, but it's not Beelzebub in the sort of Christian view of Beelzebub. It's Beelzebub in the Gurdjieffian view, coming from the Armenian mystic Gurdjieff. Now, I don't think Gurdjieff's mentioned, but he hangs over this video for me. It's like the elephant in the room. Once you start watching the video, there is a profound thing that nobody, I think, accounted for. Is that Bill Riflin, the drummer and then keyboard player with King Crimson, who has played with bands like Ministry, he is one of the closest musicians to Robert Fripp. So you get the feeling that Robert Fripp has been through this big journey with all these different musicians. Some people can hack it and some people can't. But Bill Riflin is someone that is really in harmony with Fripp's approach. And it really wants to do the best for the music. And in that, he's become a very important associate of Robert Fripp. And I think Fripp describes him as one of his few close friends. And again, putting their two personalities together, it's like yin and yang. Bill is easygoing, he's relaxed, he's funny, he's like, when someone asks him a question, he's like, well, what do you want to do? You know. But Bill has stage 4 colon cancer. The guy is dying. And as I watched this film, that subtext, which really gives this documentary a punch that other documentaries don't have. Because when you watch it, at that point he's 58, 59 years old. He knows he's going to die. He's approaching death with dignity and with a want to live in the moment, to experience the now. And then we turn to what Robert Fripp wants. And what Robert Fripp wants is for everybody to clear out their ego, to take their ego out of it and open them up. Open themselves up to the great silence and let in this experience. And if they can have that experience musically, it will move the audience. And when somebody doesn't do that, he doesn't see it as his ego, because he's actually trying to lose his ego into the eternal now. And Bill Riflin is in that situation. He has no future. So he is trying to drink every last drip. Even though he's in pain, he wants to drink every last drip of life experience. And he wants to spend it on tour in this band, which for most people is like a war zone. Okay? So we have this theme of life and death. I have, as we all have, grappled with life and death. And this documentary is not only about Bill Riflin's, impending death and how that works aesthetically within a band, but also the very fact that this is King Crimson near the end. And that is why Robert Fripp has commissioned it, I think. This is the big full stop to King Crimson. The band have stopped releasing new material that are out on this tour, and now King Crimson are pretty much over. And this is the full stop. It's the beginning and the end. It's titled In the Court of the Crimson King, which is the start. This is the end. So King Crimson's dying as well. Okay? King Crimson's music is about being in the moment. It's about opening yourself up to the silence and letting that in. Now, what I'm saying is very ethereal and metaphysical. But the peak moment in this documentary, the sort of emotional mountain peak, the crescendo, is the moment when Robert Fripp starts to talk about going to JG Bennett's group He only met JG Bennett once, and when he talks about JG Bennett, something happens which is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Now I'm going to have to tell you what that is. So if you haven't seen the documentary, I really want you to switch off now and go and watch it, because I am about to spoil this for you massively. Really spoil it. I'm warning you now. So you start to realise that Fripp was a certain person before he went to JG Bennett. He went and sat in this spiritual commune. You know, as he says in another documentary I saw on Robert Fripp when I was very young in 1984, when Three of a Perfect Pair came out, he said, I went in the JG Bennett's, you know, group and the top of my head blew off. Now, it's an experience he has happened, and he comes out, and Fripp seems to be, you know, as a guy who was like, how old is he, 78, 77, has reached some sort of balance in himself. At the end of the documentary, he talks about his own death, and he doesn't believe that he will die. He believes his consciousness is not his, and that he will carry on, and it will just be another adventure. Now, all this is very ethereal, but the thing that's not mentioned here is the Gurdjieffian aspect. So JG Bennett, let's talk about JG Bennett, because this moment is key. When he, you know, Fripp, who is like this autocratic despot that is in control, when he talks about JG Bennett, he calls him Mr. Bennett, and he only met him once, and he tells a story of coming down a flight of stairs, and he sees Mr. Bennett there, and he goes up and shakes his hand, and JG Bennett turns around, and he's a little bit deaf, and he says, you know, what's your name? And he says, Robert Fripp. He says, what's your name again? You know, and at that point, JG Bennett turns around, and he says, how long is this going to go on for? I'm not going to put you through what the documentary does, but that's basically what happens. Except, right, while he's considering that moment in his life, Robert Fripp, frozen in space, you know, in this world of silence, which is referenced right at the front of the documentary, we see a little tear coming down his face. The shock of silence, right? But you think, and most people watch this documentary will not get this. JG Bennett, right? JG Bennett. Now, what did he say? I can't even remember. It was something like, because we have this pause as we're waiting for this answer. We're waiting for an answer. And when you watch the documentary, I froze as well. I froze. And as I froze, the silence opens up. The void opens up in front of you. And we're expecting something and not knowing. I'm like waiting for something and I don't know what it is. It's a really strange experience to have. Waiting for something. This is a profound thing. I myself became obsessed with Gurdjieff when I was a young man. I eventually turned away from it, but the amount I read and studied, I never actually did the movements, I never went down that path. But my worldview has been really influenced by Gurdjieff. Now, JG Bennett was one of those sort of English upper middle class people that got a job in the army. He was well travelled, and because he was well travelled, he was able to speak a lot of different languages. So, in the 1920s, when you had that sort of Turkish war thing that Lawrence of Arabia was involved in, he was very useful in terms of, being able to talk to different people. So he's going around the world, and as he's going around the world, he's getting in touch with all sorts of different, religious viewpoints. But most obvious is he's coming in touch with Sufi, which is the esoteric religion, part of the Islamic religion. He's having to watch certain individuals that are coming through Turkey because there's this war going on. There's a lot of people moving. And because of that, he comes into touch with two characters, George Ivanovich Gurdjieff and his associate P.D. Ouspensky as well. And he goes and meets them. They eventually, Gurdjieff sets up in the Priory in France, in Fontainebleau, and he starts this sort of group. And Bennett goes and studies there, and then he has to go back to England, and P.D. Ouspensky goes with him, and he studies with P.D. Ouspensky. Now, P.D. Ouspensky has a certain view of Gurdjieff, which was, in the end, removed from Gurdjieff's teaching, and Gurdjieff denounced him. P.D. Ouspensky also was an alcoholic, so towards the end, it's like it didn't seem as though his approach had actually done him much good. Whereas Gurdjieff had said to JG Bennett that he believed that he would be the transmitter of his work, as they call it. In terms of when Gurdjieff died in 1979, the esoteric practices that he had developed, which he called the fourth way, and this is a way of achieving enlightenment, which was more conducive to people in the Western world. It didn't involve becoming a monk or a yogi or a fakir or whatever. There's like three other ways of enlightenment, and they all involve retreat from society. Gurdjieff had developed a method that was based upon movements. It was based upon doing repetitive things and becoming aware of yourself, called self-remembering. It was about discipline and conscious suffering. Okay, now this is really important because I know this. So when I hear Fripp talk, I know that his method to enlightenment is not this sort of airy-fairy meditational thing. Gurdjieff is not like that. It's about creating shocks. You have to create shocks that will propel you forward through conscious suffering and discipline. So Gurdjieff would get people to dig holes. He would get people to dig holes to the point of exhaustion for them to have this realization about themselves. Now, JG Bennett, that work, apparently Gurdjieff had told JG Bennett that he would be the English wing of that. And so when Ouspensky dies, there's an argument whether that's the case. The other person is Madame de Salzmann, Jean de Salzmann, and she, who lived right up until late, almost 2000, she becomes the main vehicle for the transmissions of ideas. Now, it could have been JG Bennett, but JG Bennett opened himself up to a whole ton of other things. And another thing he opened himself up to was a thing called Subud. And a practice called the Lahatien or Latien. It's something like this, right? And like I'm saying, I'm reacting here, so I haven't done the research. It's all out of my head, so you've got to bear with me with this. But this was an approach to sort of instant enlightenment. Now, JG Bennett then turns away from Subud, and he also explores a whole bunch of practices. And by the time he's in the early 70s, and he's a few years away from death, you could almost say that JG Bennett has created his own enlightenment approach, and that is what Robert Fripp comes up against in the early 70s. And I don't know what it is because I didn't go through it, but what I can imagine it's a mixture of the Gurdjieffian idea of unconscious suffering and discipline, which aids self-remembering, and Subud, which is the relegation of the ego and opening yourself up to the great silence. And that in people allows something in the sort of guy that came up with Subud, he had an experience where oh God, I can't remember this. JG Bennett did. I mean, I was going to say this. JG Bennett had, when he was in in the army in the First World War, he got blown off his motorbike and he had an out-of-body experience, and he had a revelation about consciousness. But the guy that invented Subud, I'm never going to remember his name. This was something where he basically opened himself up to the void, and something came in, and he felt that his body was taken over. This is all about out-of-body experience. It's all about consciousness coming from without and opening yourself up to that, and it's about the diminishment of the ego to let that in. And this is really specific. This is the thing with Robert Fripp. This is specific. This is a guy that has attained sort of a mainstream hold on the music industry, but is channeling this deeply esoteric stuff. Now, what chimes with me is I became aware that when you play music, you're really trying to access something all the time, and it's not about you. And when people are in that zone, they feel, all musicians will say this, whether they're spiritual or not, they will say that they'll feel like the music's not coming from them, it's coming from somewhere else. All musicians say this. So music is a vehicle to open yourself up to this void, to the silence. And the silence, that void, is death. That's what void is. The ultimate void is death. Right? And we live knowing that that void is approaching us. And in some people's cases, it's closer than others. In Robert Fripp's case, in the band King Crimson's case, and right up in your face in Bill Rieflin's case. Or Rieflin, I'm saying it two different ways. So I'm trying to do my best to say it in the right way. These themes that run through this documentary are incredibly powerful. The contemplation of the void, and how if we accept the void and we take our ego out of it. Now, you know, the reason why we're all scared of dying, those of you who are scared of dying, and I'm scared of dying, it's because I feel that my ego, myself, you know, me, will be destroyed at that point. Ego death. Right? Me. Even if someone says, oh, well, your consciousness will exist, you'll be in the trees and the wind. I don't want that. I want Andy Edwards. I want Andy Edwards. You know, I'm not going to embrace that void. I'm propped up by my ego. My ego is what keeps me going. You know, the idea of Andy Edwards and that person, you know, which is generated by me. It's generated by me when I make a YouTube video. You know, it's like the other day I went to see Shane Embry from Napalm Death, and I said, shall I, you know, make a YouTube video? So I'm sat here like this and chat to Shane. He said, is it all right if I make a YouTube video? Yeah, okay, well, I'll just get my camera out then. I'll get my camera out and I'll put it on and hit record. Hi there, this is Andy Edwards, and today I'm at Shane Embry's house, and I can feel everyone in the room go, what's happened to him? That's the ego. That's the ego. It's that veneer is almost like what rock and roll's about. But if you have rock and roll, which is the sort of will to power, it's that sort of postmodernist Nietzschean Superman. It's like standing and going, I'm a rock star. That is all ego. That is all front. But rock music has an esoteric heart, and it's King Crimson. And the superstar rock musician there is not a Robert Plant, and it's not a, you know, Jimi Hendrix or a Prince. It's a Robert Fripp. It's a Robert Fripp sat in the corner with no lights on him, sat down in contemplation, looking like some bank manager, but a spiritually enlightened bank manager. That is what King Crimson is, the esoteric heart of rock and roll. And the esoteric heart of rock and roll is the fact that rock music, with rock music, you are able to face the void. That is within, right? It's in Black Sabbath, it's in Led Zeppelin, it's in Hendrix. Right, it's in Bartok, and King Crimson is basically Jimi Hendrix and Bartok. That's what we have. It's about the void. It's about death. It's about opening yourself up to the void and allowing this thing in. This quiet but strong voice, which is always there. It's always there, and it exists in the silence. And I did the same technique on this video that Robert Fripp does on his, except that his is intense because we have the tear as he accessed that idea of what JG Bennett said to him, which was, I will remember you in the future. And then he dies. You know, there's something really profound I think I can't easily put into words at that point of what that itself means. I didn't give it that much thought early on. When I got to that point, I can't remember what he meant, but that's what he said, and I do remember it. And it's almost like contradicts everything I'm saying. Why would JG Bennett, who's about to die, remember Robert Fripp in the future? Well, the question is, firstly, would JG Bennett know he was going to die? Well, yes. So what future are they talking about? They're talking about the promise of creating a strong person that will survive death. I think Robert Fripp believes that in doing music, he consolidates his I. Not his I, but himself. And himself is not the ego. I believe through doing that, he believes he can consolidate his own I and consolidate the musicians in the band and maybe the audience. Don't know if this is the case, but that is a spiritual practice. He sees King Crimson as a sacred practice. He's trying to help the world. He's trying to transform the world through music, which is the same thing Bill Riflin says. I'll say it both ways just in case. He says the same thing. It's almost like Bill Riflin's. It's like he is like the opposite of Fripp, but he has the same intention. I love doing YouTube and I love making music. I'm coming up to 500 videos on YouTube, you know. I hope I live a long life, and I hope when I eventually peg it in the future, which will be a long way off, I hope. And this is all what this is about. This is about life and death. I'm hoping there'll be like 5,000 videos there. And when somebody comes across this, it will take them years. In fact, it might be a task that is nobody will be able to get their arms around what I've created on YouTube. And if you look at the music I make, I'm very prolific. And I think that this idea that of if I can aesthetically create this thing which is to do with improvisation, it's to do with me coming, I am right now, I'm not having a peak experience because that's the thing that music does, but when I do these videos, I do surf the wave of the eternal now. I'm in a zone at the moment, and when I switch the camera off, I will be back in the normal world, and back in the world of future and past, but right now, I'm in the zone chatting to you, right? And I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what this video is about, but I've got a vague idea that I've stumbled into the idea of life and death and the void and the profound and the shadow and all that bit. That's all in here. And you're watching that and you're riding that wave with me. And when I've got like 5,000 videos up there, you know, that nobody can get their hand on me doing that, because that will exist. When I die, that will exist. My essence will exist still. But it's not my essence, it's not my ego that will exist. It will be me accessing this great thing that's out there. This universal consciousness, perhaps. And because of that, I will be able to move on to the next point. That's what I think King Crimson's about. That's what I think Robert Fripp's about. That's what I think that documentary's about. Powerful, really powerful. I had no idea that that's what it was about when I started this video. I had no idea. But I do. It's about life and death. It's about the void. It's about the fact that death does not exist for those who are able to access the now. Right? Accessing the now has become a little bit of a cliche, you know. So people think, you know, if they light a joss stick and they put on some drony music and they do some yoga, they're accessing the now. But that actually requires a huge amount of discipline. It requires a huge amount of commitment to suffering. It's about suffering. This is all the Gurdjieffian stuff. This is the thing that I grew up with. So for me, my meditation is music, but to meditate on music is actually quite a difficult thing. Listen to some drony music, that's not meditation, right? That's just the aesthetic idea of something airy-fairy. I just don't believe that. You have to enter into something that puts you on a knife edge, which is the music of King Crimson. You know, multiple time signatures, you know, profound concentration, you know, systems that you're in. King Crimson. And the bizarre thing is I'm pretty sure, right, and I always talk about King Crimson as a sort of the Gurdjieffian spiritual band, you know, that's what they are to me. But of course, Fripp didn't discover this until he broke up the original King Crimson in 1974, which is a troublesome thing for my concept. But I think the reason is because it's not about Fripp, it's about all the musicians. All the musicians were trying to access something with that band. The appearance of Jamie Muir is very important. You know, when I saw him, this is almost like a mythical figure. And when I saw him in the video, I took a gasp, you know, because that guy as well, I think must have had I know he had an influence on Bill Bruford that was profound. But Jamie Muir, I think he then goes off to into a monastery. It's all about that, and I feel that generation was searching for that. And in someone like John McLaughlin's case, and in someone like Robert Fripp's case, they've achieved it. And now here we are, you know, 50 years later with a documentary. It's powerful stuff. It's powerful stuff. At the end of the video, Fripp comes up and he says to Toby Amis, "You've got it all wrong. There was a moment that really exposed what King Crimson was about and you missed it. It's all been a big failure." And he walks off. Now, was that the moment? And did he capture it? Or was there this mythical moment that he missed? Or is it a shock to the system? Was Fripp, throughout this documentary, trying to put these obstacles against Toby Amis in a Gurdjieffian way of creating a shock? Because Gurdjieff believed, you've got to understand that the esoteric stuff behind this is very specific. It's not airy-fairy. In this documentary it seems airy-fairy because Toby Amis doesn't know about it. And I think it's good that he doesn't know about it, because if I was making that documentary, it would have been dripping with Gurdjieffian references. But Gurdjieff believed that the world was like a triad. It was three things. So, you know, when we have the binary of, say, heaven and earth, or you have the binary of, say, you know, male and female, or you have the binary of space and time, these binaries are also mitigated by a third, and so it's a little bit like the sort of Greek dialectic. You would have, basically it would be like affirming something, denying something, and reconciling something. That is the law of three in the Gurdjieffian sort of law. And the processes by which things come into being, which are basically an essence of the law of three, the law of seven. This is esoterically contained in music because you have the law of the octave and of the triad. You know, when you hear a major chord or a minor chord, that chord personifies the essence of things. And the scale from which it comes is the process by which things are transformed. Music sort of embodies that. Gurdjieff was a musician and he composed music. When you look at the major scale's laid out to, metaphorically and realistically show you how, when you travel through the process, the law of the octave, which is the law of process, there are certain points which require shocks. So when you look at the major scale, you will notice it's black notes, but they're only between, there's only 5 black notes, and there's 2 notes between E and F and B and C where there's no black note, and that represents the point where you need a shock. You need a shock to move from the 3rd to the 4th, right? The 4th has esoteric qualities in itself. In the major scale, the 4th is not harmonic with the triad. It's really unharmonic. And the cycle of 4ths, we tend to think of the cycle of 5ths, but if you think of the cycle of 4ths, the cycle of 5ths is diminishment, it's going down, but the cycle of 4ths is ascending. So you are ascending the octave when you go to the 4th. There's a distance there which requires a shock to go from E to F. And then when you get to the end, you go from B to C, and B is also not harmonic with the major triad, and there's a great shock that then moves you on to the next octave. And the whole processes of the universe, according to Gurdjieff, are layers of these octaves. So you would have you would have like man, the earth, the moon, the planets, the sun, God. That would be, and each of those would be an octave. And of course, Gurdjieff thought we were sort of ruled by the moon. That the moon was actually an entity that was keeping us from self-remembering and having a conscious eye. So it's robbed us of our ability to access the materials that will consolidate our eye so we can survive death. This is really what this is all about. This is what this is all about. And on this video, I wanted to say I had a profound experience watching this video, especially, and you think, how the hell could they make a film about this and a guy is actually dying in the film? Right? This is really profound stuff. This is why this is a great documentary, and this is why you need to watch it. Right? And the summit of it, I'm going to go back to this now, the summit of it was that silence, and I've done it. It's a system. I did the same thing in this video. It's a technique. And when I did that, when you were watching it, it put you into a certain place. And what it is it's like hovering on the edge of a cliff. That's the feeling. It's like being frozen. It's a kind of meditation. It's the shock. Bah! Did I make you jump then? When someone makes you jump, that moment after you've been made to jump, that moment you're in the same place. There's a moment of silence. There's a moment of void. King Crimson is a meditational band, but they're a band that uses these techniques to create peak experiences in themselves and in the audience. This is profound stuff. Is King Crimson really special for doing this? No. Mavish Orchestra did it, Miles Davis did it, John Coltrane did it. All the great music does this to some extent. Because music is this. Music is the embodiment of the harmonious union between time and space, between past and future. That's what music does, and it can't help but do that. And there are things in music, there's harmonies and rhythms that have an effect on your consciousness. So not only does it harmonise these two things, but it harmonises it with material that is of the now, which will affect you emotionally. It's like Indian ragas, you know, that they those scales and those harmonic systems they have are designed to have an emotional effect on you. So you have an emotional effect on. I mean, I've tried to do this video. I've tried something really difficult. It might have failed, but twice now, I have put things in this video that have got nothing to do with me talking. There's their techniques, which would have had an emotional effect on you, but have placed you into a position to listen to the silence, explore the silence, for a few moments, repress your ego to open yourself to this thing that is there, this thing that wants to enter your life, this thing that is there. That often the traumas we've had in our life which affect us emotionally, that the solution to those traumas, the reason why those traumas are there is because there's a voice within the trauma of you, the real you, trying to come through and say, look, this has happened to me. This has happened to me. And you've got to listen. And your ego goes, no, don't. I don't want to listen to you. I can't face that. I don't want to listen to you. And the little voice goes, but you've got to listen to me. And I don't want to listen to you. There's a trauma there. And I think that tear that rolls down Robert Fripp's face is the fact that that trauma that drove Robert Fripp to be so difficult, which was his search for this as a young man in King Crimson, that the truth he found in that moment with JG Bennett of him needing to subjugate his ego perhaps, or the confrontation with death, whatever it was, because I don't know what it was and I'll never know what it was. If I knew what it was, the world would be a completely different place. I cannot know what that was. That tear represents something to us all. We all know what it is, and yet we don't know what it is. That tear represents the trauma of our lives and the healing process, which is so important, that music offers to us. It's about listening to that voice inside, and that voice is not your voice. It's the voice of humanity, collective consciousness, whatever. That's what it is. Yes? Hi. All right. That's my daughter, you see. There's the embodiment of my little daughter. He's come in to talk to me, and I'm talking to you like this. It's all about my ego and it's all about YouTube and my duty as a parent, and my little daughter who's gone, where's Dad? And she's coming. She knows I'm filming YouTube videos. I've told her not to, and she comes in across the garden like that in the sunshine, opens the door. And that's why I normally I don't answer, and they know. But I thought I'd answer because I thought at this moment, the great whatever it is out there has just embodied exactly what I'm saying. The child in you. The child in you. That child that's coming and tugging at you and going, I don't like this, you need to sort this out. No, I don't. That is where all your anxieties, all your angst is in you trying to put down that child that was so damaged in some trauma. And trauma can be anything. I never thought I'd be talking about trauma. And yet, throughout the video, all those musicians that seem so grateful that they played in King Crimson describe it as being traumatic. The documentary filmmaker is having a traumatic time, obviously, trying to make the film. Fripp is working as he's doing the beautiful task of providing controlled conscious trauma for his musicians in the hope that he will be able to, for them to access this thing with him and the audience. So this is why he is not an autocratic despot, because to be an autocratic despot, it is the infliction of your ego and your will on everybody around you. If you watch this channel, and I get it in the neck so often for views I have politically, you know, when I talk about race, I talk about all these different things because of its relevance to jazz and all that type of stuff. Underlying that is this idea that I don't believe that we should, whatever we believe, whatever we think we're right or wrong, and when you have a moral position, it's very easy to go, I have this moral position, it is absolute, I need to inflict that on you, so you have to do what I say now, because what I'm saying is not what I'm saying. It's the truth. And that aspect is in Robert Fripp as well. That is, I've just contradicted myself, because is he? He believes he's right to do it. I think he believes that he is doing good. And I think he's doing good, because I think the aspect of music is difficult, you know, and I've surrendered myself to music all my life, and I've suffered for doing that as well. This is the void. I have spoken to you for nearly an hour, and I have talked my way through, and I'm pretty pleased with what I've done. I think I've wrung something out of that documentary which is worth doing. It's not just me saying I thought it was good or not good. I'm hoping you watch it and think, oh yeah, this is I got something from this. But at this point I've walked myself up to a point where everything is contradicting itself, where everything has its polar opposite. We're up against the void. I mean, before I did it consciously, but that time I just got to a point where I thought, is there any worth to what I'm doing here? What the hell am I doing? Is it just babble? I really want to express something truthful with my videos. I wouldn't be making all these videos if I didn't think it was important to make them. But they might not be important. I might be just wasting my time. They capture, even when I talk rubbish, even if I get something wrong, they're capturing me as just a human being. I'm not anything special, but I'm just a human being that is allowing myself to free associate around the subject of music on camera for other people to watch. If that wasn't compelling, then no one would watch, but it does seem to be compelling, and I don't think it's because I'm special. I think it's because through fate, I have ended up in a position where I am doing that. I'm the one that's doing it. And as I've done this channel, I've learnt a lot in terms of how to do what I'm doing now. This is becoming a skill. And the skill is about the bravery of actually stopping worrying about looking a fool and exploring what's there regardless. I have acted like a fool many times on my videos. Humour is a very important factor to my videos, because it allows me to become the fool, the court jester. But none of this that I'm saying is mine. It's not mine, and I absolutely don't know anything. So this is just talk. All this is just talk. It is what it is. It could well be that when I talk, I am able to say something that other people, I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know I did a video before this one on Stephen Wilson's new album, and I got the down here. I got my white cup, the Adam Neely white cup of wisdom, which proves that you are a proper YouTuber. And I really nailed it. My ego was all like this because I'd really got to something that I thought was pretty profound, and I was quite pleased with myself. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to do the King Crimson one now, and that's going to be even heavier. But you're kicking out the part now, so I hit record, and I started this with my ego in full back. And as I've explored down this subject towards this void, when you get there, and that moment where I look, it was supposed to be a parody where I sort of parodied what Fripp had done in the film, but at that point it affected me. And there's this overwhelming feeling to forget you lot and to just look out the window at my garden's a mess, but it's beautiful. Let's show you what I'm looking at this. Zoom in a little bit.